Yo, what's good, YouTube? This is Jay from TNJ, and welcome to the Season 4 recap episode. If you have not seen the last episode, which was the Super Bowl, spoiler alert, we will be revealing what happened in that episode, so if you didn't watch it, go back and watch it now. But in the playoffs, the Oilers went on a fantastic run. We won on the road versus the Colts. The Colts have been a really good team in this series, by the way. The Buffalo Bills we beat 2 times in the last 3 weeks of the season, including that game in the divisional round. We beat them down 45-14. We then went on the road and beat the mighty Chiefs, ending really the Chiefs dynasty. And then the Super Bowl was an amazing game. Go back and watch it if you haven't already. Obviously, looking at this result, you can already see what happened. But if you've seen it, you know it was an excellent game. And towards the end of last video, I revealed that Keon Carter was actually the MVP of that game. I was wrong, and you don't know until you advance to the offseason and really find out who the MVP was. It was Devin Bush. Devin Bush was the MVP of that Super Bowl because of that interception on the first drive. I'm actually surprised that they gave it to him, and I looked at the players of the week. It was between him and Antonio Gibson. I honestly would have gave it to Gibson just because of the second half that he had, but Devin Bush with an interception wins the MVP. I want to go back to that game because one guy really shined, and it was Keenan Davis, the rookie receiver who we were thinking about trading up to get last draft, if you remember. I think this coming draft, if I see a player I want to trade up for, I'm just going to do it. And I wanted Keenan Davis last year so badly. But in the end, Casey Burton got the best of him, but the rookie showed up. 8 catches for 92 yards. And remember, the Carolina Panthers were the team that stole DeAndre Hopkins away from us. We tried to bring Hopkins back to Houston, but obviously in an Oilers uniform. And then DeAndre Hopkins retired before this season started, prompting the Panthers to go ahead and draft Keenan Davis. And Davis showed up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this for a couple of guys in this series going forward. I'm going to give him a super boost because there are guys that just have a really big year and jump up to be like top 10 in the league. I think of like guys like Jamar Chase, like Justin Jefferson. They went immediately from the rookie year to being top 10 receivers overnight. And I think Keenan Davis is eligible to make that jump. So talking about this season, I think it was really fun. We obviously saw 2 quarterbacks, Davion Spikes and Keon Carter. That was a fun run we went on when Carter was out. And it really, raised the question, who's going to be our starting quarterback? But in the end, Keon Carter was, in my opinion, the safer option. And I think that Spikes, while he was athletic, he had a quick release, he has a lot of potential. I think Carter is our guy. He is a very accurate quarterback when he's on, obviously, like every other quarterback. But looking at what he's done in his body of work, he can do it all. He can win these games. He can win the close ones. He can not turn the ball over. I think with Spikes, obviously, the big play ability is there, and I think that's the draw to him. Both are really good quarterbacks. I just think that Carter is a little bit better at this moment. In this season, we had a couple of dev trait upgrades, and mostly it came from awards and other obviously goals that could have happened, but for the most part, we didn't get too many of the scenarios to upgrade dev traits, and we weren't successful when we got them. But Danny Rudd won Rookie of the Year. He got an upgrade. Antonio Gibson back to an X Factor because he won both the AFC Offensive Player of the Year and Best Running Back, so he gets a dev trait upgrade. I want to highlight Maurice Finch, though. He doesn't get a dev trait upgrade, but remember, Joel Bitonio retired, and he won the last 2 Best Offensive Lineman awards in the AFC. Actually, just not the last 2. He won the first one in his first season with the Oilers, then he finished 3rd this season. So Maurice Finch right now is the placeholder starting left guard for us. Casey Burton also earned a superstar X Factor upgrade. I'm not exactly sure how, and I think it's maybe because he was an all-pro, considered an all-pro. He was not a top player in interceptions. He did not lead our team in interceptions even. Maybe it's just because he was a very good player and one of the best in the league. I'm not exactly sure. Dave Washington also got a dev trade upgrade, and I'm wondering if this is because he finished top 2 on our team in tackles. I'm not exactly sure. But that does spell disaster for Devin Bush, because now I'm going to move Dave Washington over to middle linebacker, and that basically makes Devin Bush unre-signable. I don't see a way that we bring him back, and I think I'm going to let him walk in free agency. Other guys like Nick Woods, Christian Barmore, and Von Cross all came into the season as X Factors after their years last year. But that leaves a hole in our defensive line, in my opinion, next to Christian Barmore. And I'm looking at guys like Devin Bridge, who was a 6th-round pick last year, but he's not a guaranteed starter. I could be looking at defensive tackle or defensive lineman in the draft. I will also have to look at some pass rushers, because like we saw with Von Cross, anybody can get injured at any time, and you're gonna need some young players to step up. So that's definitely going to be something I'm looking for in the draft. Let's talk about Keon Carter and Davion Spikes. 25 touchdowns and 5 interceptions for Carter. I thought he won Super Bowl MVP. He did not. And then Davion Spikes had a very similar year. He was hot for a little bit, but I think that big play ability, obviously he makes a lot more riskier throws because of his ability to stretch the football field with not only his arm, but with his legs to extend plays. And I think that gets him into trouble a little bit, but he's a very, very good young quarterback. And I'm going to keep both. It's not like I'm going to be trading and doing all that like we did with Phillip Waters and DTR. I think that having both quarterbacks is very valuable. And then third string, we also still have Malik Willis. Obviously, running back is a solidified position, but going into the offseason, I'm going to make it a priority to re-sign Antonio Gibson. I've come to that decision. He is a legend in this series. He's averaged 6 yards per carry for 3 straight years. That is just insane. 22 touchdowns this year on the ground. That led the NFL. 1,600 yards, 1,693 to be exact. That was second in the NFL behind Bijan Robinson. He also had 40 catches for almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, this guy could have won MVP, but Patrick Mahomes is still in the league. I mean, look at the list of awards he's won. He's made 3 Pro Bowls, AFC Offensive Player of the Week. I think he's done that more than once, but I guess he's only done it once. And he's won 3 Best Running Back awards in this series. And then finally, the Offensive Player of the Year this year, capping off a big Super Bowl where he could have won that Super Bowl MVP. But one position I have not addressed is future running back. I don't know what kind of contract I'm going to sign Antonio Gibson to. It could just be a franchise tag if it comes to it. So I'm going to need a running back of the future. And Chase Brown is now, after 4 seasons, getting up there in age. And I don't think he's the running back of the future. He's a good back to have, but I'm probably going to be looking to draft a running back. And if the running back class is good this year, we could look at that running back position early if we don't sign AG to a long-term deal. But I really like guys like Willie Wayne Jr., who stepped up in AG's absence. I don't think he's really the running back of the future per se, but he's a guy that can fill in when he's called upon. And as we saw in the playoffs, he was actually called upon more than he was in the regular season. He got 15 carries in the playoffs, and that Bills game was a big one. And then in the Super Bowl, he had 4 big carries. Like, they were big carries, like when the game was on the line, and he did what he was supposed to do. Receiving wise, it's more cut and dry, to be honest with you. I'm looking at guys like Jake Hawkins, who had an amazing year, but he's got a whole lot of potential, especially with that speed, agility, and acceleration. I mean, the sky's is the limit for him. And I just look at his career with New England. He wasn't doing anything until he came to the Oilers, where he had his first 1,000-yard season and had 7 touchdowns in about 3/4 of a season with us. Jesse Fisher Jr. was hurt during the Super Bowl in the last 2 weeks of the season in the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl, but he had a great year. I think it's time for him to step up as really the number 2 on the team. He's really been the number 3, but this year he had 9 touchdowns to his name. And I think that he is a future part of the success of this organization, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. Danny Rudd had 78 catches, 948 yards. He was just shy of 1,000 by 52 yards. Also had 12 touchdowns as a rookie. That led all rookies in touchdowns and also led our team in touchdowns. But I said cut and dry because I think it's time to move on from Marvin Mims. He's going to get a big payday somewhere. It's going to be over $100 million, probably just based on his ratings alone. And he's probably going to be the top, if not one of the top rated free agents going into the offseason. He scored 0 touchdowns this year. That's just something that's unheard of. To get 888 yards receiving and 0 touchdowns, it's kind of crazy to me. But we'll see what type of contract he gets. One of his motivations is being close to home, and he is from Texas. So there are 2 other Texas teams with the Texans and the Cowboys. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up signing with one of those 2 teams. That means that now going into his 3rd year, receiver out of Auburn, Quincy Hall, is going to be playing a big role, but he is still very, very young. And so is Marvin Mims. I mean, Marvin Mims is going into age 25 season. Quincy Hall is going into age 23 season in his 3rd year. And looking at his stats, he had 7 touchdowns in his rookie year. And I think he's going to be very, very good. Remember, he was a 3rd round pick for us 2 years ago. And I think that those 3 receivers, we talk about Quincy Hall, Jesse Fisher, and then also Jake Hawkins. Those 3 are going to be the top 3 receivers going into next year. And I don't see myself really adding anybody else because we have guys like Deion Branson. We have David Lewis Jr., who we're going to try to retain. He's an undrafted free agent this year. We had to re-sign him, so hopefully he wants to re-sign. He stepped up a little bit in the playoffs. He had a couple of catches versus the Chiefs. So I like these undrafted guys to develop them. And that's what the fun is in a lot of these series, just drafting and developing. It's not necessarily spending a bunch of money in free agency. It's really like fulfilling some guys' potential and finding out if guys can, play. One guy we traded for a couple of years ago was Nicholas Petit-Frere. And when we traded for him, he was really good. He gave up 2 sacks last year. This year, he gave up 8. He did not really miss a game at all, and that was maybe his shining part, his what he worked best at. But I think that maybe, just maybe, we sign him to an extension, and we maybe shouldn't have. So that's something to look out for. Kevin Dotson's going to be a free agent, so I'm not sure if we will re-sign him. He had some blocking issues this year. It wasn't really apparent on film and during games, but it's because we ran to the left side. If you noticed, during games a lot, we ran to the left a lot, away from his side. So it kind of masked, kind of his mistakes that he was making. David Bakhtiari will be a free agent, and he's also a candidate to retire. So his backup, Mark Schilling, who I've been developing, and I just talked about it, developing players, is probably going to be the starting left tackle unless there is a guy in the draft that's a can't pass guy. Mark Schilling is going to be the guy. I really like what he did when he filled in for Bakhtiari, and I'm very confident that he can do a good job. And at that, we already signed him to a pretty cheap extension, so we already got a cheap left tackle and a guy that we know can play. And he's filled in for David Bakhtiari and only given up 1 sack when he did so. And that was like 8 games this year. So, I mean, it was a pretty good sample size. Defensively, we had a very good year. Statistically, we're apparently like one of the bottom 5 defenses, but that's only because we were giving up yards, and I don't know how. I mean, we were dominant. Like, there were games where we were dominant on defense, it just seemed like, and I don't know what happened. I honestly don't. But Devin Bush, top tackler, but probably a free agent, and we're probably letting him go. He's played a good career. I wouldn't say it was amazing, though. He was an impact player, I think, the first couple of years. Like, he was making plays all over the field, but now it's Dave Washington's turn. I don't know if you guys noticed earlier, but I changed his position over to middle linebacker, and his overall went up to like 92 or 93. He was a number 5 rated middle linebacker in the game, and that was enough justification for me. And I still don't know how he got the dev trade upgrade. Maybe you guys know. Is there something else that triggers that dev trade upgrade besides being a statistical leader or an award winner? Not really sure. But Von Cross won Defensive Player of the Year in the AFC. He's going to be really ready to win it again going into next year, his 3rd year in the league. And remember, when we hit free agency, we're going to need to be smart, because a lot of these guys that we had that are young on the team or going into a contract year next year are going to look for extensions. One of those guys is possibly Christian Barmore. Not this season, but next offseason, we're going to have to pay him. And he had 14 sacks. I mean, he was a monster. He had a stretch of games where he was the best player in the NFL. It was like through the first 9 weeks of the season. Then all of a sudden, Von Cross not came out of nowhere, but really stepped it up and really took over that best player in the AFC position. And Barmore has been great in this series. And you just see his career high was 7 last year. And he had back-to-back 5.5 seasons in season 1 and 2. And then he just turned into a monster all of a sudden this year. And, I mean, he was a big reason why teams just could not throw the ball like they wanted to. I think the pressure from he and Von Cross definitely made a difference. And it really, I think, catapulted our defense to being, elite. Another guy that was really good and has been really good has been Heath Burnham. He had 7 sacks this year, actually 3rd on the team. And looking at what he's done so far for us, we acquired him from the Green Bay Packers after season number 2, and he's had full 2 seasons with us. He had 4 sacks in his first year with us, and now 7 sacks. I mean, he has been amazing. What a gem he was to find him in trade. Then there's Nick Woods, who I think, to me, is just a good defensive player. He was drafted number 6. He's obviously superstar X Factor. He had 6 sacks in back-to-back years. He's not the elite pass rusher that I thought he would be. I think he's just a solid player, and I'm going to move him around probably next year. He's not going to just play edge rusher, and he did a little bit of that this year, and I think I'm going to move him around. I think he's a very versatile guy. He's athletic enough to play everywhere, so that's kind of what I'm going to do with him. I do plan on drafting defensive linemen in this upcoming draft, because I tried to sign Sam Hubbard, and he made a minimal difference. When he filled in, I didn't truly notice him on the field. He played a lot, though, and I think that that's going to be the approach this year. I won't be a big spender in free agency. I'm going to try to find some gems probably in free agency, and hopefully that will help. But guys like Sam Hubbard and Brian Asamoah didn't really make too big of a difference, so I'm going to be looking to build this team through the draft and hopefully still be a very good team in the AFC. Alani Rutherford on the back end was really good in season number 2 as a starter, and this kind of is the trend for, these cornerbacks that we draft, and we've drafted 2 very good ones. Casey Burton was the number 1 pick in this entire series for our organization, and Alani Rutherford was a first-round pick a couple of years ago. And then in his rookie year, he had 2 interceptions, and this year he had 4 interceptions. He was really, really good, but nobody better than Casey Burton. He was an all-pro this year, and that's maybe why he got the dev trade upgrade. I'm not sure how the game records that, but he was amazing. I believe it's because he was actually deflections is a rating, or is a stat that Madden determines who gets dev trade upgrades, and I believe it's because he was top 3 in deflections. I'm not exactly sure on that, but maybe somebody can verify that for me. But he was amazing this year. I mean, nobody could really pass it to his side. Even in the Super Bowl, when he was getting burnt, you see he had 4 deflections in that game, but when it counted, he made the plays, and that's exactly what I imagined Casey Burton would be, like one of the most elite cornerbacks in the game. Well, the number 1 quarterback coming into this series, though, was Bryce Hall, who really came on in the playoffs. He had 2 interceptions on Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game, and he's just been Mr. Consistent. I haven't asked him to do too much ever since drafting Casey Burton. I mean, he's been taking a back seat to Burton, but he's been remarkable as a nickel corner, and you can just see 2 interceptions at least in every year. And I think my priorities coming into next season in the offseason are re-signing Bryce Hall and re-signing AG, Antonio Gibson. You know, I'm really excited for this draft, mainly because this is a big offensive lineman draft, and that's not very exciting, but that means that there's going to be plenty of other talent in the second and third rounds. It's going to be heavy in the first round with offensive linemen and quarterbacks. As you can see, there are 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 prospects in this draft, and there are plenty of offensive linemen really projected to go first round. I'm not sure who will go number 1, though. There are a lot of good players at the top of this draft. I don't think for us anybody worthy of trading up, because I like the talent in this draft. Matt Shelton, for example, is right now the number 10 rated prospect, but he is a top 5 talent. I don't know if we would ever trade up for him, but he would be like the only guy I would trade up for in the top 10. But I look at like all of the talent here. There's just a lot of tackles. Look at Dalvin Pinkston. He is a round 1 to 2 talent. Very good pass blocker. Jimmy Fleming, very well-rounded offensive tackle. And we made sure to scout all these tackles to completion. Gerard Ward, one of the best offensive linemen in this draft as well. They say he's around 2 to 3 talent. I'm not trusting that, because last time we saw that with Chris Blackburn back in season 1's draft, he ended up being amazing. One of the best players I've seen in this series. And then looking at some other guys, I mean, there are still like elite level offensive linemen here at the bottom of the first round. So I don't see a big need to trade up. I want to take a look at Niles Dotson, for example, out of Penn State. Penn State has been the favorite school to draft from in this series, and they have produced guys and dogs. And looking at his ratings, he is amazing. And I think that tackle is going to be a position we draft. I don't know if it's going to be first round, but there is a lot of offensive lineman talent. Some guys I'm looking at, I don't know if you just saw Dexter Hunter, a defensive end who could play a little bit inside as well. And there are some guards in this draft, because we lost Joel Bitonio, we lost David Bakhtiari. We could be looking there, but we'll see. There are a lot of guys I like in this draft class. This is a very deep one. Like this might be the deepest class. Maybe not the most top heavy draft, but it is the deepest class. And I don't think there's any argument here. We will see that in the offseason more in depth. But going into the draft, the Patriots have the number 1 pick. They were 2-15. How about the Bears? They have the number 2 pick. That's significant because remember, Phillip Waters is technically the quarterback right now for them. And then the Chargers, what are they going to do in the offseason? They have the number 3 overall pick. But now that they're in a division competing with now a Super Bowl champion in the Oilers, 2-time Super Bowl champion in the last 3 years in the Chiefs, and now the resurgent Broncos, who are building around their young quarterback, do they possibly move Derwin James and even Joey Bosa in the offseason? I think it's a real possibility they go into a full rebuild. I think they need to get the value that they can get out of these guys before they get older. And both of these guys have tremendous trade value right now, especially with teams trying to get over the top and win that Super Bowl. They do need some receivers, though. Joshua Palmer right now is their highest rated. He's at 81 overall. Quentin Johnston is still there. KJ Hamler. But these guys aren't going to move the needle. Just looking at what the Chiefs have, they have Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney. Those guys are both over at least 88 overall. They did also trade for Jalen Hyatt, and he immediately went for 900 yards. So I'm sure they'll add another weapon. And I'm curious to see when Travis Kelce will retire, because a lot of these guys in this series at least have been retiring in their mid-30s. And if Aaron Donald doesn't retire, this could be a very viable option for the Chiefs to trade for Donald and add one more guy for a potential Super Bowl run. The Broncos are interesting. They went 8-9 this year. I thought they were going to be headed for a top 10 pick, but they ended up competing at the end, even beating us. They traded Jerry Jeudy acquired a second first-round pick from the Colts. But, man, I think they're going to be in good position to really build on their roster, and hopefully they build it right. And I'm looking at receiver. They're probably going to need to replace Judy. Probably going to need to shore up that offensive line. They have some holes. So we'll see what they do in the offseason. But I'm very excited for our division. It's been very, very competitive. And I think that the Chiefs and mainly the Broncos are probably in the best position to build something special in the offseason. I wonder which one will make a big splash move, especially with Aaron Donald possibly hitting free agency. So that's going to do it here in season number 4. We will hop into the offseason next episode. Let me know what you guys think we should do as far as moves. Leave your comment down in the comment section below. And I'm excited to build more in this series, especially through the draft. Hit subscribe, hit that like button. Hope you guys enjoyed this Super Bowl run. This series is not even close to being over. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.
Boy, all that like Keenan. Still got crack, they fiendin'. Flow still hot like Phoenix. Shine so bright, I'm gleaming. This off top, I'm tweaking. Fresh out the rat like Neiman. And I'm still tryna fight my demons. Cause we all gotta act like Tina. That's why I gotta ride with the Nina. Outside, it's a war going on.